Hello everybody and welcome to my first ever podcast. My name is Chris. Online I go by Physicism, or people have shortened that and nicknamed me Phi. I am making a board game. I tried to make a game in the past. I spent 2.5 years on it. It was going to be a trading card game / board game where you kind of like Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone or Pokemon, but instead of just having like a row of cards in front of you, it was set on a board, so you could actually like move the cards, the units around and position them and move closer to your opponent. Anyway, I spent a long time on that game and eventually gave up on it because it just became too hard to balance with like over 200 cards that I designed. I might eventually return to that game, but a few months ago I started developing a new game. I took about a couple of month break from it, and now I've started working on it again, and I've decided to make this podcast about designing and making that game. I've wanted to make a podcast for a while, but I've never really had a topic that I wanted to talk about so much. I'm currently driving to work. Every Monday morning I drive to work for 4 hours, and it just hit me that I could use this time to make a podcast about this game that I'm making. I apologize if the audio quality is really bad. I'm just using like my earphones and recording on my phone because I obviously don't have any better recording equipment with me. But yeah, this is, I'm just going to give this a go. This is the first episode, and let's jump into this game and let me tell you all about it. So currently this game is unnamed. I've worked on it and I've thought about it for maybe 3 or 4 months now, and I still haven't come up with a good name. I've decided to put off naming it until I really come up with a good theme around what this game will be. I'm currently working on the mechanics of the game and the gameplay and everything before I decide on a theme and before I actually start like getting artwork made for it and stuff, just because the game could change quite drastically, and then I would have to change the theme if I change all the mechanics. So that's the way I'm approaching making this game. I'm starting with the mechanics first, and then I will build the world around that. My inspiration for this game is basically Battle Royale games, so games like Fortnite, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, Apex Legends I think it's called, Apex. I love the concept of those games. I love the idea that there are many people in one world and it's a free-for-all, and you start out with basically nothing. You start out with a pickaxe or whatever the hell you start off with in Fortnite. Basically you start off with a very basic weapon that you can kill someone with, but you go around, you loot chests. There's ways for you to gain better items, and people are starting off doing that, getting better items, and then slowly people are starting to kill each other off and pick up all the items that they get from those people. Eventually there's one winner, there's a last man standing. So that is what I want to create. I want to create that entire scenario, that feel in a board game. So that's been my inspiration for this game. I've also for a long time wanted to create a board game set in a maze, well, a type of a maze, and my big inspiration for that was Harry Potter 4 in the Triwizard Tournament, when there's that race to the center of the hedge maze, and the maze is shifting, and it's every man for themselves. And yeah, I just love that concept, that feel of you're in this shifting maze and you are, yeah, it's a free-for-all and it's every man for themselves. My goal is to try to combine those two concepts into one game. So it's a free-for-all with honestly as many people as possible. Obviously not like 100 like in those Battle Royale games, but ideally up to 6. As many people as possible, free-for-all in a shifting maze type scenario where initially you are gathering items and trying to improve yourself, and it's a fight to the death and last man standing. Okay, so that was my initial concept going into making this game. I've made a few prototypes now, and from the very first trial of the first prototype that I made, it was just me versus my fiancée Tanya, and we had so much fun. I was blown away by how good my first version of the game was, and that's why I've been so excited about this game for so long, and I just know there's something here. Okay, I'll explain maybe not my first version, but I'll explain like the most recent working version that I have. Okay, so picture a square map. It's not exactly a maze. At first glance, it looks like a maze or a labyrinth. So kind of my working title for this game is Maze Game, but it's really not a maze, because in a maze you have a starting point or several starting points, and your objective is to navigate the correct path through the maze, and there's a solution, right? It's either to get to the center or it's to get to the other side of the maze or something. My game is not exactly a maze because there is no correct path. There are lots of dead ends and pathways you can take, and it's all like narrow corridors. It's basically a 15 by 15 grid covered in walls, and imagine like if you're walking along a pathway, you always have two walls beside you. It's never like you have a wall on your left side and then on your right side is another row of spaces which you could equally be walking on. It's all narrow corridors and corners and blind spots, of course. Okay, so that's kind of what the map looks like, and scattered amongst the map are chests. So there are different tiers of chests. Kind of around the outside of the map there are tier 1 chests, and then more inside that there are tier 2 chests, and then close to the center there are tier 3 chests. And this is different depending on which map we're using, but that's the general idea. So there are 4 starting positions on this map, on the square map, 1 in each corner. So for that square map you can play with up to 4 players, minimum of 2. So you start on the corner and then you roll the die on your turn. So one person goes first, they roll the die, and they can move that many spaces. And then let's say they roll a 5, so they move 5 spaces, and your initial goal is to move onto these chests and loot items. So how that works is basically there's 3 piles of cards, and if you land on a tier 1 chest, you draw from the tier 1 pile. If you land on a tier 2 chest, you draw from the tier 2 pile, and then there's a tier 3 pile. So initially you're drawing from, you're looting tier 1 chests, and then you might get to tier 2 chests, or you might try to attack another player. But at the beginning of the game you're quite separated, so it's less combat, more looting, very similar to a Battle Royale style game. Okay, so what do you do with the cards? The cards in the chests are weapons and armor. Each player has a mat in front of them which has 6 slots on it for cards. So there is a helmet slot or a head slot. There is a cape or an amulet slot, so like a neck slot. There is a torso slot for like plate bodies or tops. There is a legs slot for like plate legs or like pants. And then there is a weapon slot and a shield slot, or a right hand and a left hand slot. So there are 6 slots where you can place these items. So let's talk about the weapons. For weapons in the game, there are 3 types of weapons. There are melee. I say melee, I know other people say melee or whatever, but melee weapons, so swords and daggers and battle axes and stuff. There are ranged weapons, so bows, crossbows, that sort of thing, things that shoot long distance. And there are magic weapons, so wands and staves and things like that. The combat in my game and actually the weapons and the armor are largely inspired by RuneScape, which is a medieval game similar to World of Warcraft that I've been playing for, I don't know, 15 years or something. So that was kind of my inspiration for the items in the game. Okay, so how the combat works is, so the melee weapons have a range of 1. The ranged weapons have a longer range. They might have a range of 3 or 4 or 5 or something. And then I think all the magic weapons have a range of 2. And the melee weapons have higher attack damage. So each weapon has an attack and a range. So yeah, the melee weapons are like high attack but only 1 range. The magic weapons are medium range and medium attack damage. And then the ranged weapons are long range but low damage. So if you want to attack somebody, you have to be within range of them according to your weapon that you have equipped in your weapon slot. So let's say I have a a magic weapon, maybe it's a wand, and it's got 3 damage and 2 range. So if I'm standing 2 spaces away from somebody and I can see them, that's important as well. There can't be any walls in the way. I have to have a direct line of sight to my target. I can attack them on my turn. So each turn you roll the die. So there's several things you can do on your turn. You can move by rolling the die and then moving your little piece, your little player token, however many spaces. And you can also attack your opponent. You can attack somebody in the maze, and you can do that in any order. So if you're close to somebody, you can attack them first and then move away, or you can just move first, like get close to somebody and then attack them. So if I'm within range of somebody, I can attack them. And now how the combat works in this version of the game, but I am going to change it, but I want to just talk about like my initial working prototype. How the combat works is, if I attack you, I have my, let's say my wand with 3 damage. When I attack you, you know 3 damage is coming in, but what I first do is I roll the die, and whatever it lands on, that number will correspond with an item slot, and that's where I will hit you. So let's say I roll a 1, that corresponds with the head slot. So I am using my wand to attack you for 3 damage, and the attack lands on your head. So then we look at what you have equipped in your head slot. If you have a helmet, let's say you have a helmet with 4 armor. So there are items in the game that you wear in the slots that are not the weapons slot, and so some of these items have armor. So for example, helmet, plate body, plate legs, shield, these items all have armor. If my attack damage of my weapon is equal to or less than the armor that you have equipped in that slot, I deal no damage to you. Your armor protects you from my attack. So let's say I have my weapon does 3 damage and you have a helmet on and I hit you in the head, and you have 4 armor on that helmet, then you won't take any damage. And everybody starts with 20 life in this version. So the goal is just to reduce everyone's health down to 0 and be the last person standing. But let's say you had nothing on your head, then you would just take the full damage of my attack and you would take 3 damage. So your health total would go from 20 down to 17. Let's say you had an item equipped like a wizard's hat or something, which doesn't give you armor, but instead it gives you some boost to your magic damage or something like that. It has some other effect. My attack would destroy your wizard hat and also deal the 3 damage to you. So yeah, an item in that slot that doesn't have any armor doesn't protect you at all, and it I destroy your hat or your whatever, a cowl if you're a ranger, and then you take that damage as well. So yeah, that's the idea of the combat. You are within range of another player, you attack them with your weapon, which has a certain attack damage, you roll the die, and whatever the die lands on, that's where on their body you're going to attack them, and you then resolve it, and it goes on like that. So this game has worked. I've played it with 4 players. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I'm missing. So obviously, like, the tier 3 items are stronger. So for example, there's like a gold sword tier 3 item which just has 20 damage. So if you swing at someone and they don't have any armor on, you're guaranteed to kill them if you hit them in that slot. I'm trying to think if there are any other mechanics that I'm missing before I go into the problems of this game. But yeah, so this game works. It's really fun. One of the big goals that I want my game to be is I want the games to only last like 5 to 15 minutes max. Like if you have the maximum number of players, whatever that will be, maybe 4 or 6, depending on what style of map I end up with, I want the games to go for 15 minutes max. And the reason for this is I want you to be able to play the game multiple times in one gaming session. I hate games like, okay, I like some longer games, but if you don't enjoy, like let's say you play a game for 2 hours and you didn't enjoy it, you are never playing that game again. But let's say you play a game for 5 minutes and you lost, you can then say, okay, let's play again, I want to try again, and give it another go. maybe I didn't like it that much that time, but maybe it was just I just got unlucky or something. Let's say you want to play a game and you only have 30 minutes to play. You could play a 15-minute game twice, but if you want to play with somebody and you have 30 minutes to play and you know the game goes for 2 hours, you can't play it. So I want to design a game which is fast-paced and short rounds, basically, but it's the whole game, which many people can play, and you can play it many times in one session. So my game did accomplish that, and it was very fast-paced. The game went for maybe 20 minutes. It might have been a bit longer, but that's just because, when I was playing with new players, I was teaching them how to play. But on the second and third rounds, it would go faster. Okay, so the problems with my game. I sent my printing instructions, and I sent my prototype to my sister living in Australia, and she printed everything, all the cards, and cut everything out and played the game with her husband, and they had fun. But she felt my sister lost, and she felt like the game was too random, that it was fun, it was good concepts, but she lost and she didn't feel like she had enough control over what happened in the game, and she wanted to she asked me if I could make the game less random. And so I've been thinking about how to do that since she played a couple of months ago. And so let me just address what randomness there is in the game and why it's bad. So currently, when you go to a chest, actually let's talk about the combat first. My combat is very random. It has exciting elements, but usually the excitement is good for one person and bad for another person. So let's say I have a plate body on with 15 armor, and I also have a cloak which lets me teleport through a wall, or move through a wall once per turn, and the cloak has no armor. When somebody attacks me, I 100% want them to hit my plate body, which is I think item slot 3, but anyway, I really want them to roll a 3, because if they do, they will hit my plate body with 15 armor, and I will take no damage, and their attack has been completely wasted. And the other slots I don't really want them to hit, because I might take some damage, but I super don't want them to roll a 2, let's say, because that's where my cloak is, which is extremely powerful. It lets me move through a wall and access chests much faster, and hunt down other players much faster and kill them. So a player attacks me and they roll. If it lands on a 3, I'm extremely happy, and they are extremely sad, because not only have they come up to me and attacked me, they are now vulnerable because I can attack them on my next turn, and they can't respond to it because they can't move away after they attacked me. In another scenario, they rolled a 2 and they've now attacked me, and it's destroyed my cape, which was really good, and dealt damage to me. So I might either be dead and the game is over, or I'm extremely close to dying. And yeah, it's a really bad outcome for me and a really good outcome for them. So the problem with this type of randomness is that the control for the player attacking happens before the randomness. And so what they do is they choose, okay, I'm going to move up to you and attack you, and that's the end of their control for the turn. Then what happens is the randomness, which is out of their control, and they just see where they hit me, and so the outcome is random. It's called output randomness, I believe. A different type of randomness is called input randomness, where the random event happens first, and then the player exerts their control. So for example, input randomness would be you roll the die, the random event happens, and then you decide which direction you want to go based on the roll. So you might be standing 2 spaces away from a tier 1 chest, and 6 spaces away from a tier 3 chest. So if you roll a 6, you decide to go for the tier 3 chest. If you roll a 2, you decide to go for the tier 1 chest. So that's input randomness. The random event happens first, and then you make your decision based on that random event. So my combat feels much more random because you make your decision first and then you roll the die and see what happens based on your decision. And that is, it feels much more random. It can be, like, depending on your outlook on randomness, and like, I kind of like that kind of randomness, but I know a lot of people hate it because, yes, a better player will make better decisions on average and will probably win more often than a player making worse decisions. But the feel for the player who loses, they can easily blame their loss on randomness because they got unlucky on that last roll, or on several rolls. They got unlucky, and one player was hitting the items they didn't want them to hit, basically. You can blame it on luck. And I want to make a game with a high skill ceiling where you can't blame it on luck. You can't say, oh, I lost because I got unlucky and now I don't want to play again. I don't want you to be able to blame your loss on luck. I don't want you to feel unlucky in my game. I want you to feel, okay, I saw where I went wrong there and I want to play again and I want to improve. So, how can I change the combat? That's the big question. I tried a game last night with Tanya where instead of rolling the die when you attack somebody, you kind of attack them, and whatever items they are wearing, you add up all of that armor. And let's say I'm wearing a total of 10 armor based on like a helmet and some plate legs or something like that. And then Tanya attacks me with a battle axe or something with 15 damage. So because I have 10 armor on me and she attacked with 15 damage, I take 5 damage to my health. That's a much more simple way to do the combat, and it's way more information, like, known to both people. Like, obviously, if she attacks me, she knows exactly what's going to happen. She sees how much armor I have on, and she will know the outcome. So that is actually no randomness in that. So that feels better for both players because you can't blame that on luck. It's deterministic. But there are many problems with that implementation, which I very quickly realized when we started trying it. The problem is the different styles of combat in my game. So in my game, you have 3 different types of weapons, like I said, and melee weapons. If everyone only had melee weapons, that type of combat might work. But because there are different styles of attacking players, like for example ranged weapon users, they are attacking from a distance, from a safe distance, and they're dealing less damage every time they attack, and they're trying to chip away at their opponent and kill them while avoiding being killed themselves. Because the ranged weapon users, so like rangers with bows and crossbows, their items that they want to have equipped do things like increase the damage of their bows attacks and increase their range, but they have very low armor. So if they take a hit from like a knight or a warrior or whatever, they will take a lot more damage because their like leather armor has way less armor, so they will take more damage. So the problem with that implementation is, let's say I'm a knight and I've managed to get like 20 armor on me. If the ranged weapon users can't deal more than 20 damage, then they can never hurt me, and they can't chip away at it over time. So another problem with that implementation is you have to keep track of how much armor you have on you, and there could be like a little a dial or something keeping track, so you don't have to add it up every time you get attacked. But it's still like more things to keep track of, whereas before when somebody gets attacked, you just see the outcome and you only have to worry about one attack damage matched up against one armor amount. So I've realized that system is also not going to work. So yeah, I need to redesign the combat entirely. So I don't know, this week I'm going to think a lot about the combat, and hopefully in next week's podcast I've got some new ideas which I'm ready to test. Well, okay, this week while I'm away, so Monday evening to Thursday evening, I'm going to brainstorm new combat ideas and come up with some new cards to make, and then on the weekend hopefully I can test them with Tanya and maybe some other family members. So that's pretty much all I'm going to say about the combat for this week. I might bring it up later, But that's kind of where I'm at with the combat. I'm kind of stuck on how to make a good combat system. I like the idea of having 3 different combat styles, similar to what it is in RuneScape. Yeah, melee being high damage and close range, magic being medium damage, and ranged style being long range and low damage. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about in randomness is looting chests. So in the current implementation of the game, you just walk onto a chest and you draw a card and it goes into your hand, and that chest is then looted for the rest of the game. My idea for the game is that the board will start with tokens on all of the chests, and the token shows an image of a closed chest, and then after you stand on that space, you remove the token, and underneath, like on the actual board, there is an image of an open chest, so you know that that chest has been looted. So the problem with this type of randomness is that you're executing no control. You have no choice in what item you get, and your game plan, like your strategy, depends entirely on which cards you get given randomly. So you might want to try like a magic build, but you are only drawing melee and ranged like armor pieces. And so I wanted to add more control into the game. So last night when me and Tanya played, we tried a new method of looting chests, which was, instead of just drawing the top card off the pile, the idea was you are looting a cursed chest, and so basically the chest will only allow you to choose one of the 3 items inside. So you actually draw 3 items off the top of the deck, and you get to choose one of the 3 items to keep. So it's still random in that you are drawing 3 random cards from the deck, but then you execute some control. You choose which one you want to keep, and then it feels much less random and much more strategic, because you actually get to, you have some say in your game plan. It's not just completely dictated to you. We absolutely loved this implementation. I got the inspiration from Hearthstone. There's a mechanic called Discover, where instead of like getting a random spell just generated for you, it says discover a spell, and you get a choice of 3 options. I basically completely copied it from Hearthstone, but it works really well. Now it feels much less random because you have some choice in which cards you add to your hand. So yeah, I'm hoping with this implementation, and then with a fixed combat implementation, the game will feel much less random, and it will feel like the winner of the Battle Royale deserved to win and didn't just get lucky every time. Next, I want to talk about the battlefield, the maze, or whatever it's going to be. So currently it's a grid. It's square spaces, 15 by 15 or 20 by 20 or 10 by 10. Like, I've tried a few different map sizes, and I think 15 by 15 seems pretty nice. But all of the maps that we have used have involved no like changes to the map throughout the game. It's just been like a static piece of paper that the map never changes, and the walls don't shift or anything like that. And the advantages to this approach is that I can design the map to be balanced. I can place chests where I want them. I can have like the tier 3 chests more difficult to reach than the tier 1 and 2 chests. It's very controlled. I can balance it, tweak it, make it exactly how I want, and yeah, I can have a balanced map. That's the main advantage. The first disadvantage to that is that it's the same map every game, and you are like, every time I play, I take the same path because I have my own preferred method of accessing the chests. So I know, like, okay, I want to go for this tier 2 chest and then head for the tier 3 chest, and on the way pick up this tier 1 chest. And as soon as I said that, I realized that I forgot something about randomness. Another thing which we changed in last night's playtest was we removed the die rolling aspect of movement. When I played with 4 people, it felt really bad for the people who kept rolling 1s and 2s, and it felt really good for the people rolling 5s and 6s. And the people rolling 1s and 2s, quite rightfully so, blamed their loss on their bad rolls and bad luck. Over the course of a game, you're probably going to roll the die, I don't know, 15 or 20 times, and of course you will average out, because over all the rolls, your average roll will be 3.5, but you remember your bad rolls much more than you remember your good rolls. And if you start out rolling bad and you see other people gaining cards, and like especially if that person then attacks you, like gaining items earlier at the start of the game helps you a lot, because there are items that help you move more. Like there might be a cloak which makes you move more each time, or lets you teleport through walls and whatever. So getting good rolls early is definitely a big advantage. I wanted to try removing that aspect of the randomness as well. So last night we tried an implementation where instead of rolling to move, we just moved 3 spaces per turn. And so we kept in all the items where it allows you to move 1 more space per turn, for example. So instead of, like, if you have that item on, you will move 4 spaces per turn instead of 3. It did feel more balanced. However, it didn't feel as fun. Like rolling a die and seeing how far you move feels more fun than just moving 3 spaces. So I'm not sure what the correct answer is there. I'll have to do a lot more testing, but my instinct is that rolling to move is correct. It is the better implementation than moving a set number of squares, but I'll have to get the opinion of other playtesters. Like, I like a lot of randomness in my games, and yes, balance and fairness is of course important, but I think the most important aspect to a game is fun. Like, you're not playing this game to have a fair experience. That's not why you play board games. You play board games to have fun, and so having randomness adds to the fun, I think. Rolling a 6, you know the feeling of rolling a 6. It's fucking enjoyable. It just is. And so I think I need to keep that in there, and I have to somehow balance it so that if you are rolling poorly, you are still somehow compensated for that. Okay, getting back to the design of the board. I have an idea for the board, which I'm not sure it will work, but I am trying it out. I tried it out on the weekend. So my idea for, okay, before I get into like a randomized board with shifting walls and stuff, another idea I could try is, instead of having square tiles and a massive square board with 4 players, the board could be a hexagon, like a very large hexagon with a honeycomb structure inside and hexagon shaped spaces. So I believe that I can keep everything about the game the same, the cards, the combat, everything, the items, and just change the board. I haven't tested it yet, and I will, and see if any problems come up. But my idea is, yeah, it's hexagons. So like, instead of having 4 directions to move in, like north, south, east, west, you have 6. So you have for each space there are 6 bordering spaces. And I haven't tried designing a maze or like a labyrinth looking battlefield like that, but I will give that a go, and I think that can work as well. So I think the main advantage to that is having 6 corners to the map, and so potentially having 6 players with 6 different starting positions. I haven't tried designing a board like that, but I will try that and see how that goes. Okay, so now I want to talk about shifting walls, because that is like a huge like conceptual element that I love in the theme of what I want this game to be, a labyrinth where you are constantly adapting to the map and it's shifting, and you need to use strategy and foresight and forward thinking and work out a good strategy and a good game plan based on shifting walls. So one way to like randomize the board as well is to have tiles with spaces on them. So let's talk about square spaces. So picture a tile which has 9, like a tic-tac-toe looking tile. It's got 9 squares on it. It's got 1 square in the middle and then 8 squares around it. it's a 3x3 grid of squares. So I could have some system where the tiles are maybe double-sided even, and you randomize the starting board so that you just place the tiles down randomly and cover a big square in these tiles, and then that is the labyrinth which you're going to have your battle in. In theory, sounds really fun. It fixes my problem of always taking the same path, because now the board is random every time, and so every time you play the game, it's a new board, you have a new strategy, it's extremely replayable, and that's what I really want my game to be. I want my game to be super replayable. I want it to feel very different every time you play. I want you to have to adapt and come up with new solutions to new problems. So this system could also work with a hexagon-based board, a honeycomb structure board, and I actually made a program over the weekend in Python programming language, that randomized the board based on this tile structure, and I am quickly coming across problems with this idea. So my implementation was that the tile, okay, for the honeycomb, I haven't made a program for the square-based one, but I might do that during the week. For the honeycomb structure, the rules for the tile was there were no walls around the edges of the tile, but there were walls within the tile. So there was one hexagon in the center and then 6 hexagons around it, so one bordering each of the edges of the one in the center. And then the board was made up of like one tile in the center, and then I think 6 tiles around that, and then 12 tiles around that one. So basically it's a huge hexagon kind of board made up of these tiles of hexagons, which each have 7 hexagons on them. So my rule was that the edges of the hexagon couldn't have walls on them, because I wanted to make sure that you could move between these tiles. So yeah, and then there could be walls on the hexagon. And my rule for the walls within the hexagon was just based on randomness. So it was initially a 50-50 chance whether there was a wall on a specific like space edge, you know, like an edge between 2 spaces. It was just a 50% chance to have a wall there or not. And it kind of worked nicely. I was generating some nice randomized maps, but the problem was that it was random, and so without any like rules for the tiles, one person could be at a huge advantage compared to another person. They might have much less walls in the way between them and where the chests were, and another person could have a more difficult path, or like chests could be completely surrounded by walls. So there was actually a chest in the middle of each of these tiles. Yeah, I think I need to come up with better rules for the tiles so that there is it's more fair and less just randomized. But anyway, another problem with this implementation is that it lost the feel of a labyrinth or a maze. These tiles with just random walls on them, it just looked like a scattered like battlefield of like ruins or something, where it's just like bits of walls everywhere, and it didn't have the same feel of a labyrinth you're navigating with walls everywhere, but there's corridors, and you know, it just didn't look anything like the designs that I had made with my square labyrinth with specific walls. So I'm not sure how I can come up with a randomized labyrinth which is different every game, but still has that feel of a labyrinth where you have corridors and pathways to go down, dead ends with chests at the end of them. So I'm not sure how I'm going to fix that, but I will let you know. I am going to make a video series for developing this game. I want to talk about some like I want to have this podcast as like a way to discuss different mechanics and solutions to problems that I'm coming across. But I am aware that a lot of the stuff that I talk about is so much easier represented with an image and like video. So this is only the first podcast, so I am going to learn from this. I'll see how this goes. Okay, is there anything else I want to talk about in the first podcast? Potential changes to make. Also, I want to add maybe some monsters to the maze. I'm just going to throw out now random ideas which I might try to implement. So maybe I want to add monsters which you have to kill, so they're not just a chest to loot and get stuff from. It's a monster that you have to kill and you get drops from the monster, and it's more challenging to kill them, but you get better items from them. I like the theory of this. I like the idea behind it, the flavor of it, but just thinking about it, just thinking it through in my head, I realized that there's several problems with it. One of which is the combat in the game is specifically designed for person-to-person combat. So a ranged, like a bow wielder, chips away at their opponents over time and deals smaller damage, but from a safe distance. And I don't really know how that could work with monsters. Because let's say a monster has 10 health or something and you have to kill them. I don't want somebody to spend, if their bow does 2 damage, it feels shit to spend 5 turns chipping away at a monster to get some random loot. So I'm not sure how it can work. I feel like looting chests is just a much better way to get items, because you just open the chest, get it, and move on to the next thing, either hunting down a player or moving on to the next chest. So I'm going to keep in mind adding monsters within the maze to kill other players. Maybe the monsters move around randomly. That could be an interesting thing. Maybe the monsters are not there to kill you. I mean, you're not there to kill the monsters and get loot. They are just there as extra enemies, which can like ghosts in Pac-Man. They kind of move around randomly and either block paths or deal damage to you. And maybe you can kill them, but you don't benefit from it other than clearing the path. I don't know. I'll think about how to add NPCs to the maze. Another thing I forgot to talk about with the shifting walls, I didn't actually talk about the shifting walls, I only talked about randomizing the map. So how the shifting walls could work is that you rotate these tiles, and rotating the tiles could be done in several different ways. So one way is that within the cards that you get from chests, there could be spells, or you could get items which allow you to rotate tiles. So it might say an orb that you hold in your left hand instead of a shield, which allows you to rotate an adjacent tile once per turn. You get to rotate it 90 degrees. So let's say it's a square-based grid map, and you're standing on a tile, and you're standing on a space next to another tile, so you're standing on an edge between your tile and another tile. You can rotate the tile that you're standing next to 90 degrees. And there could be so many ways that you want, so many reasons that you want to do that. So you could be standing next to a tile that another player is on and they're trying to escape you, and you rotate the tile so then they can't escape you, and you can then move onto the tile and attack them. It could be giving you better access to chests, because they are difficult for you to access, but if you rotate the tile, then you can access it. It can be avoiding somebody who's chasing you down, so you rotate the tile, and then because of the change in walls, they now have a harder time to get to you. So I really want to try as hard as I can to make that work, but if it doesn't work, I can just live with a map which is the same every game. I mean, League of Legends and other MOBAs, multiplayer online battle arena games, they play on exactly the same map every time, and the map isn't really the thing that's making each game feel different. It's the team composition and your opponents and stuff like that. So I can just make it a static map that the randomness comes in just which cards you draw and what your opponents are doing and stuff, but I would like to try as hard as possible to give you a random map every game and allow you to shift the map throughout the game. Another thing that I want to implement is a starting strategy. So the current implement of the game, everyone starts with a dagger as their starting weapon so that you have some way to kill your opponents. even if you have no other weapons. So the dagger is just a melee weapon. It has like 4 damage, I think, in 1 range. That's it. So from the get-go, you can attack other players. And that was a good like addition to the game. Initially you started with nothing, and your items could be destroyed, and like it could get to the point where you can't damage each other. But with the current implement of the game, if you have no other weapons equipped, you have a dagger equipped, which means everyone is starting with a melee weapon, which kind of pushes you in the direction of choosing, amulets and whatever that boost your melee damage. But I want to add some system where you are choosing your starting weapon, and also I want to have some sort of starting ability. Like in Hearthstone, you have a hero power, which is a button that you can press every turn, and it gives you some very small bonus, or it does something small every turn, and you've chosen that from the start of the game. I want my game to be similar. I have one idea for my game that is based on Egyptian mythology. So it could be that you are like up to 6 players, and there could be 6 gods, and you are like a follower of one of the 6 gods. And so it could be like Anubis and Ra and the other Egyptian gods. And so there could be like 2 gods based on melee, 2 based on ranged, and 2 based on magic. And so depending on which god you've chosen, you have some sort of ability which you can do every turn. So it might be that you have +1 speed, so you move 1 extra space each turn, and whether that's going from 3 spaces to 4, or if we use the die rolling implementation, you just add 1 to each of your die rolls. It could be that you have some sort of vision of what's in the chests. So at the start of your turn, you can take a look at the top 3 cards on the top of each pile, so you have some idea of what's in the chest. Like, I want everyone to have some sort of advantage in a different way. This is going to really add to the replayability of the game, because you might try out one starting ability and not like it, but then you saw somebody using something else and you really loved that idea and you want to try that next game. One game that I got for Tanya for Christmas this last year is called Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle Defense Against the Dark Arts. It's a deck building duel game, 1 versus 1, very similar to Slay the Spire, but it's 1 versus 1. And one mechanic that I really loved in that game was basically you choose a house at the start of the game, so you can choose to be Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Slytherin, or Ravenclaw, and then you're adding cards to your deck, and the cards are like spells and items and stuff, and they have some base effects when you play them, but then they also have an additional effect based on which house you are in. And I won't go too much into the details of that game, but basically, like, if you're in Gryffindor and you pick up a Gryffindor spell, it does some base thing, which it does for everybody, but if you're in Gryffindor, then it does some extra little bonus. And I love that concept, and I want to try and incorporate that into my game as well. So in my game, like with the Egyptian god concept, it could be like an Anubis. I don't know what he does really. I don't know what the concept of Anubis is. All I know is that he's a dog-headed man. But let's say Anubis is one of the magic gods. It could be like the staff of Anubis or something. And so it does something very powerful for everybody if they have it. But then it has some additional little bonus if you've chosen the Anubis god as your god, if you're a follower of Anubis. So I love that idea, and I want to try and incorporate that into my game as well to add to the replayability. This podcast is getting pretty long, I think, as the first podcast. I have no idea how long I want these to be. Let me just check the time now. Holy shit, I've already been talking for nearly an hour. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up by talking about one other concept which I want to add. Currently, all of the cards in the deck are either items that you can equip, so it's a weapon or it's a piece of armor, or actually there are 2 other things. There are traps, and there's just like 1 trap in each tier. So the trap can be like a slime trap, I think, which makes you move less next turn. It's like spike trap, which like destroys one of your armor. Anyway, it's like something bad that happens and then you draw another card. Or it's like a bonus chest. So it's like if you draw from the tier 1 chest, it says draw from tier 2 instead. So there are those things, and I want to add something to the game like spells or like one-use cards. It could be like one-use items or one-use spells which do something. So for example, teleporting you or like moving you some extra spaces. It could be moving your opponent. It could be shifting the walls, like moving a tile or something. I want to add that to the game, and I also want to add portals. So portals would be like a space with a portal on it, which gives you access to a space with a portal somewhere else on the board. Not sure if I want this to just be like randomized just on the board from the start of the game, or if it should be like an item or like a spell that you cast which places like a portal token on like your space and another space, something like that. But I love the idea of moving into a portal and popping out somewhere else on the board for some sort of strategic advantage, like gaining access to a chest or hunting down somebody else. Having more movement within the board rather aside from just moving one space to the next space physically on the board. I think I'm going to wrap up the podcast there, because right now I'm kind of just like spitballing ideas that I've thought of but have not yet implemented. I hope that this podcast has been somewhat cohesive and you've been able to follow kind of my general idea of what I want the game to be. If you've enjoyed this podcast, that's awesome, and I'm really happy that you made it to the end. Go to my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is just Physicism. It's spelled Physiscism. Basically the word physicist, but instead of a T at the end, there's an M. Go to that YouTube channel, and I want to be uploading YouTube videos about this game as well. Probably very similar to this podcast. Actually, I might just make this podcast into YouTube videos so I can have fuck it, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to make these podcasts into video podcasts with like video, when I'm talking about items, I'll show examples of the items. When I'm talking about the board, I'll show the board. I can't be bothered making separate YouTube videos talking about exactly the same stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, on Monday mornings, record this podcast on my way to work, hopefully less than an hour, because obviously in the first one I'm talking about a lot, but then in subsequent podcasts I'm going to be just talking about changes that I made over the past week. And then maybe on Monday night or Tuesday I will edit all the audio, take out all the ums and ahs and shit, and make it exactly how I want it, and then make a video to accompany it and upload that to my YouTube channel. I'll see if I can work out how to upload this podcast somewhere so that you have access to it. I hope it's free, so I can, you can listen to the audio if you want to do that, and you can watch the video if you want accompanying video, so you can understand the game better. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're excited about my game. I love making board games and teaching people board games, and I've wanted to make a video series / podcast about a board game, and I'm very excited to do it on this game. Now, please, if you have ideas for my board game, leave comments on the YouTube video. Things that you could give me feedback on are ideas for combat mechanics or the board or things like that. If you know of any other Battle Royale style board games, please tell me what they are, and I will buy them immediately and play them. And I do not want to make anything that's too similar to anything else. But just if you have any ideas, please tell me. I will read every single comment, and I would love to make this game as good as possible, and I would love community feedback. I just love the idea of somebody giving me an idea for just an item or like a hero power, whatever that's going to be. If you have a name for this game, if you have a theme, it could be, ideas that I've had for themes are, the Egyptian god thing, and it could be obviously in a pyramid, a labyrinth looking pyramid themed sandstone walls, that sort of thing. It could be a hedge maze like in Harry Potter. I've thought about making it an underwater thing with a seaweed style maze, but I don't know how well that would work with bows and arrows and wands and shit. I'm not 100% locked into anything, so I'm not 100% locked into having 3 combat styles. If you have any ideas for the theme or additions to the game or changes I could make, please let me know. I will love to hear them. I will listen to every single criticism. Let me know if you hate randomness in games, if you want it to be more strategic, more random. I want this game to be, my goals for this game is to be for it to be as fun as possible, replayable as possible, short games so that you can end the game and get to a victory for somebody and play the game again. Yeah, that's my goals for this game. I just want it to be as fun as possible. I want as much community engagement as possible. Please, if you know anybody who likes this style of game, if they like Fortnite even, or like other Battle Royale style video games, if they love board games and you think they might like this, please share this game with them. Maybe point them to sections of this video / podcast which they might be particularly interested in, because I understand that a lot of people won't want to listen to a 1-hour podcast about a board game that doesn't exist yet. My goal is to spread this as wide as possible, get this idea out there, get as much feedback as possible so that I can get this game tested. I don't think I will share yet the prototype for this game. There is currently a working prototype, but I don't think I will share it yet. I will keep it amongst close family and friends. But once it's getting to the point where I am certain that I have the ideas down, I'm not brainstorming anymore, I'm trying to balance the game, I am going to share this. You will be able to print it, cut out the cards and whatever the hell is included in the game. You will be able to make it yourself and play it. Also, I'm going to make this game in, well, I think I will try to make it in Board Game Simulator, Tabletop Simulator, which is a Steam game you can buy, so that you can play it digitally as well. Yeah, I want to share this game as much as possible, basically. So I'm going to stop rambling. I'm going to end the podcast there. You get the idea. Thank you so much for listening and taking the time and getting to this, listening all the way through. Send me any feedback that you have, and I hope to hear from you. I am dedicating basically all of my spare time to this game from now on, and I can't wait to make it and continue this podcast, continue the videos for this podcast, and make as fun game as possible. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week with the changes that I've made to the game. All right, bye-bye.